What would you do if a desire you thought had been buried for decades suddenly clawed its way back to the surface, all from something as simple, as innocent, as a single touch? Not a kiss, not a confession, not even words, just skin brushing skin, as brief as a flicker of light, and suddenly the part of you thought had gone quiet forever begins to stir awake. That was how it happened to me. That was how he happened to me. His name was Liam. It began not with romance, not with betrayal, not with anything dramatic enough to belong in a novel. It began with a favor so small it could have slipped past unnoticed. A favor my husband asked in the same tone he might ask me to pick up milk. "Liam can stop by this afternoon," Harold said, his voice muffled behind the newspaper he was reading through his bifocals. "Fence is sagging at the back gate. He's handy." Handy. That was the word he used. Ordinary. Practical. Forgettable. But when Harold said it, the word lodged itself inside me. Handy. My mind turned it over like a pebble in the palm, smooth and cool, until, without realizing, I had slipped it into my pocket to carry with me for the rest of the day. At the time, Liam wasn't family. Not by blood, not by paper, not by anything official. He was more like a thread that had been woven into our lives years ago, through neighbors, through church events, through a cousin of a cousin who had asked someone to look out for him. He was simply there. Back when Harold tore a hamstring, Liam was the boy who mowed our lawn, who knew exactly where we kept the twine in the coffee can, the extra washers in an Altoids tin, the drawer that only opened if you lifted while pulling. Back then, he was 19, all awkward limbs, sunburned skin, and a smile too eager to hide his youth. Sweet. That was the word people used for him. Sweet kid. Tall, and then years passed, as they do. Seasons stacked on top of one another until the details of his face blurred into that soft, unimportant haze reserved for people you once knew but never thought about. If someone had asked me what I remembered of him, I might have said, "Sweet kid, tall, nothing more." But at 2 o'clock that afternoon, there was a knock on the door, a heavy knock, strong enough to rattle the brass fish Harold had nailed there back in 1998. I opened it and the air shifted. The way it does when someone opens a window and the room suddenly remembers how to breathe. I hovered at the sink, rinsing grapes I didn't even want, pretending to be busy while my eyes kept straying to the window. There I was, 58 years old, a wife. A woman who knew her place in the script. Garden club, choir, tea towels embroidered with the months of the year. I knew the motions. I knew how to act my age. But when Liam stood in the sunlight, grinning at my husband, as though the two of them were equals, the air seemed to change. The edges of the day grew sharper. Colors brightened. And when his wrist grazed the inside of my arm at supper that evening, when his skin touched mine for the briefest sliver of a second, something inside me that had been asleep for decades opened its eyes. That's how it began. Not with fireworks, not with betrayal, not with a choice, but with a touch so small you could miss it if you blinked. But I didn't blink, and I couldn't forget. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances and almost accidents. He came by to fix the shed door, to oil the hinges on the gate, to stack the firewood Harold couldn't manage with his dad back. Each time, I told myself I would keep my distance. Each time, I failed. The way his arm brushed mine when we reached for the same tool. The way his laughter filled the air, too warm, too easy. The way he said my name, Ellen, as though it tasted different on his tongue than on anyone else's. It was nothing. It was everything. The guilt came first, sharp and heavy, like a stone in my chest. But with it came something else, something far more dangerous: hunger. I hadn't realized how long I'd been starved. When Harold and I married, we were fire, passionate, reckless. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. But time wears passion down into routine. It happens slowly, so slowly you hardly notice, until one day you realize the fire has gone cold. He still loved me, I know that. But love had become steady, predictable, quiet. And then Liam walked in, and suddenly I was young again, wanted again, awake again. I told myself it was only curiosity, only foolishness, but deep down I knew the truth. The storm was coming. I wish I could tell you I fought harder, that I slammed the door, that I turned away, that I buried every thought deep enough to suffocate it. But the truth? The truth is softer. The truth is weaker. The truth is this: I wanted it. It happened on a Saturday, the kind of bleak winter day where the sky seems too tired to turn blue. Harold had gone into town to pick up motor oil, leaving me alone in the house with Liam. He was finishing up repairs on the shed, his boots tracking small crescents of mud across the porch. I told myself I'd stay in the kitchen, keep busy. I folded dish towels that didn't need folding. I wiped the counter twice. I scolded myself with every heartbeat. But then came the knock on the frame of the back door, low and polite. "Got it, sorted," he said. His voice was casual, but something in it carried weight. I turned. He stood there in the doorway, framed by the pale light. His hair was damp with melted snow, a dark curl brushing his forehead. His shirt clung to his chest, the fabric damp in patches where he'd leaned against the wood. And his eyes, they didn't look away this time. For the first time, neither did mine. There's a moment, just before gravity takes over, where you know you could still catch yourself, where you could still step back, laugh, dismiss it as nothing. That moment hung between us, stretched thin, trembling. I should have spoken, should have said thank you, should have said goodbye, should have walked away. Instead, I moved closer, just one step, then another. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff. You know the fall will break you, but the pull is stronger than fear. When he reached for the mug I was holding, his fingers covered mine fully this time. Not a brush, not an accident. His hand closed around mine, warm, steady, deliberate. My breath caught, and I didn't pull away. "Ellen," he said, low enough that the sound barely reached the space between us. Hearing my name in his voice, like a secret, like a vow, was all it took. The mug slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor, rolling uselessly across the tiles. But neither of us moved to pick it up. Instead, I found myself pressed against him, the distance between us collapsing in an instant. His mouth met mine, urgent and unflinching, and every piece of restraint I had clung to dissolved like sugar in hot water. For a moment, the world vanished. There was only his hands gripping my waist, only the heat of his body against mine, only the sound of my own heart thundering in my ears. It wasn't tender, it wasn't polite, it was hungry, reckless. It was everything I'd starved myself of for so long that I had almost forgotten the taste. And then, just as suddenly, it was over. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway split the air like a crack of thunder. Harold, we broke apart. I stumbled back, chest heaving, hands trembling. The mug still lay on the floor, spinning to a stop as though mocking me. Liam's jaw was tight, his eyes wide, as though he too had just realized the enormity of what we'd done. Or almost done. In the silence that followed, 1,000 things could have been said. Apologies, promises, pleas. But nothing came. Because the truth was already carved into the space between us. We had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. When Harold walked in moments later, shaking the snow from his boots, I forced a smile so wide it hurt. My hands busied themselves with the broken mug, with sweeping the floor, with anything that could disguise the fact that my heart was still pounding with the echo of another man's touch. And Liam. He nodded to Harold, calm, collected, his voice steady when he said, "All fixed." But when his eyes flicked to mine for the briefest second, I knew. He knew. We both knew. The storm had broken, and nothing would ever be the same again. That night, I couldn't bring myself to meet Harold's eyes. He sat at the kitchen table, spooning stew into his mouth with the same steady rhythm he always had, as though nothing in the world had changed. But across from him, my hands trembled each time I lifted my fork. The stew tasted like ash. My chest felt too tight to breathe. Liam wasn't there. He wouldn't be. He had gone, leaving behind nothing but the echo of what we'd done and what we hadn't. That's the thing no one tells you about desire. The hunger doesn't die once it's fed. It sharpens. It deepens. The taste only makes you crave more. In the days that followed, I became an actress in my own life. I played my role perfectly, smiling at the right times, humming along to the radio while Harold drove, folding his shirts with neat, practiced hands. But beneath it all, my skin still burned where Liam's hands had touched me. My lips still ached with the ghost of his kiss. I thought avoiding him would be easier. I thought if I simply kept my distance, the fire would smother itself out. But avoidance only made the silence between us scream louder. The next time I saw him, at church, surrounded by hymns and folded hands, I nearly crumbled. He sat 3 pews ahead, broad shoulders bent in prayer, his head bowed. From where I sat, all I could see was the line of his neck, the slope of his jaw, the hand resting open on his knee. And I wanted him. God help me, I wanted him more in that holy place than I had in the privacy of my kitchen. I sang louder than I had in years, as though volume could wash me clean. But when he glanced over his shoulder, just once, just briefly, his eyes met mine. And in that look was everything we weren't saying: the guilt, the longing, the unbearable weight of knowing. After that, the world around me seemed different. When Harold spoke, I heard kindness, patience, the same steady devotion he had given me for decades. And instead of comforting me, it cut deeper. How could I look at the man who had built me a life, who had carried groceries and shoveled sidewalks, who had stood beside me through funerals and holidays, and know that part of me had betrayed him already? I told myself it had been only a kiss, only a moment. But the truth gnawed at me. A kiss is never only a kiss. It's the spark that lights the fire, the doorway you can't unwalk through, the confession your body makes before your mouth ever dares to speak. Nights stretched long and sleepless. I lay beside Harold, listening to his breathing, while my own mind spun in circles. I tried to pray. I tried to bargain. I tried to remind myself of who I was, of the life I had chosen, of the vows I had once made with trembling hands in a white dress. But in the darkness, when memory is loudest, I could still feel Liam's lips against mine, still hear him say my name like no one else ever had. And here's the cruelest part. It wasn't just the desire. It wasn't just the hunger. It was the aliveness. For the first time in years, I felt awake. Awake in a way that tea towels and choir practice and crossword puzzles had never managed to make me. He had reminded me, no, he had shown me that I wasn't finished, that somewhere beneath the wife, the homemaker, the aging woman, there was still someone who could be wanted, desired, chosen. And once you've tasted that truth, you can never unknow it. So I carry it with me. I carry the weight of what happened and what nearly did. I carry the secret, heavy as stone, pressing against my chest each day. Harold doesn't know. He never will. To him, the world remains intact, our life uncracked, our love unbroken. But inside me, something has shifted forever. When I pass the back door, I still see the ghost of Liam standing there, framed by the light. When I wash dishes, I still hear the echo of that mug clattering against the tile. When I close my eyes, I still feel the storm of his hands pulling me closer. It was only a touch. It was only a kiss. But it was enough to unravel everything I thought I knew about myself. And though the world around me carries on, steady as ever, I will never again be the woman I was before his skin touched mine.